Tim Steed. I'm the Assistant General Manager at the Orange County Employees Association. Uh, really excited for our town hall. Some quick housekeeping items. We're going to keep the chat just to the admins. We want to make sure that our speakers are afforded the attention they deserve. And we'll have a chance to have audience questions in the latter portion of the event. So if you do have questions, put them in the chat. We'll be going through those items that maybe weren't covered in the presentation. We'll circle up to, but we want to be, again, respectful of everyone's time. Before I introduce our esteemed panel, first want to turn it over to the Orange County Employees Association's president, and that's Judy Bowling, for some welcoming comments. Judy?
Hi, thank you, Tim. I just want to say good evening to everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. We have a great panel, and we are especially thankful that they agreed to come on at 6 o'clock tonight and talk to everyone. So thank you, everyone that's on the panel. Back to you, Tim.
Thanks so much, Judy. And Judy is, a public servant who works day in and day out at the Public Defender's Office and is the president of our association. And I know we have many more workplace leaders from OCEA and our board of directors. So glad everyone could join us. We got a lot of folks here. I know this is a hot topic, so I want to go ahead and quickly introduce our panelists and some of the topics we'll be covering, and let them say hello so you can stop hearing from me, hear enough from me. First, I want to introduce Pat Moran. Backing up a little bit, OCEA is so fortunate to have Aaron Reed and Associates, which is one of Sacramento's premier lobbying firms and has been a partner with OCEA in legislative advocacy for almost 3 decades. They help draft legislation, they provide guidance, testimony, and other leadership, and have a diverse group of clients all over California that include business interests, labor interests, nonprofits, and of course, us, OCEA. And at Aaron Reed and Associates, we're really lucky to have as our legislative advocate, Pat Moran. Pat comes to us with decades of lobbying and legislative experience. He worked in the Speaker's office under Herb Wesson and Fabian Nunez. He's worked on topics such as public safety, retirement, labor issues. Prior to joining the Speaker's office, he was the chief lobbyist for the Firefighters Association here in California, and also has lobbied for PORAC, the Peace Officer and Research Association of California, and a number of other incredible organizations. We're really lucky to have Pat as OCEA's legislative advocate, our eyes and ears in Sacramento, watching our backs. So Pat, do you want to just take a minute or so just to do a quick hello before I introduce Sarah?
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. Pat Moran, Aaron Reed and Associates. Aaron has been representing OCEA for 40 years or so, I think. And when I started with Aaron 18 years ago, I was given the assignment to lobby on behalf of OCEA, and it's been an awesome experience. Prior to joining Aaron Reed, I worked for 2 speakers, as Tim alluded to, Herb Wesson and Fabian Nunez, and before that, I was lobbyist for the California State Firefighters Association and PORAC. So I've worked on a lot of labor issues, retirement, and public safety, among other things. I also do housing and I still do a little bit of fire and public safety issues, and retiree issues as well. So it's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to the town hall. Sorry I was on my phone, but we're starting to move on the budget, and the Assembly and Senate have released some information, and people are asking for numbers and information from about OCEA, and the courts was one of the texts. So it's really busy up here, and I know Sarah is equally as busy as well.
Right there in real time lobbying, which thanks for that segue too. So our next panelist, who will be able to introduce, say hello here in just one sec, coming to us live and direct from Davis, California. On the train. Is Sarah still in the house? Okay, just making sure. Sorry, I'm looking at my screen a little bit limited. Sarah started in the movement as an organizer, as an advocate, as so many of us do, but started in the United Farm Workers before joining the UC Berkeley Labor Center. Uh, she started the Labor Summer Program to train hundreds of activists. And actually, we today had our second class of UCI Labor Summer interns in as a welcome lunch. So it comes full circle. Um, Sarah founded and co-directed Young Workers United, a worker center in San Francisco that organized retail and restaurant workers fighting wage theft and winning millions of dollars in lost wages, and helped really bring national attention to a movement for paid sick days for people who work in the service industry. Has been working in the legislative space at the California Labor Federation, which represents 2.1 million members in the state of California, but advocating for all families, where she's the legislative and strategic campaign director, and works with all affiliate unions, including OCEA, to conceptualize, draft, and ultimately help pass legislation that will uplift the lives of millions of California workers. So live and direct from a train, hopefully moving soon in Davis. Sarah, do you just want to say a few words that say before I introduce Senator Min?
Yes, I apologize. I was supposed to be back about an hour ago, but there's a fire on the track. So we're stranded, but I wanted to be here because we love OCEA. I've learned a lot about the public sector from OCEA and the fights that you all have done and the incredible work you've done in Orange County, in Costa Mesa, across the board. It's fantastic to have Tim as one of our vice presidents on our executive council. And so we do a lot of work. We represent the private sector and the public sector. But we always look forward to learning about your issues and to helping and backing up your lobbyists in Sacramento. So thank you for this opportunity. And I just want to say, just really quickly, that the governor did propose in his pay revision to cut all of the UC Labor Center funding. And we just found out that the legislature has rejected that. And so we have a shot to save the UC Labor Centers.
Look at this.
So real-time updates.
Yeah, real-time updates. This is like the hottest Zoom to be on. And speaking of hot Zooms to be on, we're last but absolutely not least, a person who's directly part of the making of the budget and the negotiations that we're hearing about right now from the two legislative advocates is, of course, Senator Dave Min. Senator Min was elected in 2020 to represent Orange County's 37th state Senate district, which includes Costa Mesa, Huntington Beach, Irvine, Laguna Beach, Laguna Woods, Lake Forest, Newport Orange, Tustin, Villa Park, and communities in Anaheim Hills, Corona Del Mar, Foothill Ranch, North Tustin, and Silverado Canyon. Wow, that's some big turf, Dave. Serves on the chair as the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee. As the only Korean American in the legislature, Senator Min is proud to serve as vice chair of the California Asian and Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, where he's been instrumental in the passage of the historic AAPI equity budget. Before joining the state Senate, Senator Min was a law professor at UC Irvine, Zot. Irvine getting a lot of shout outs here today, where he taught and researched in the area of business law. He's one of the country's leading experts on banking and housing policy and has testified before Congress on multiple occasions. He has a 100% union voting record. I probably buried the lead there, which is something that we're so proud of at the California Labor Federation. And OCEA, we're always so proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Dave. Tonight, we're fortunate to be able to hear directly from him about his role in crafting the budget. And we maybe even might get some of that impressive Simpsons television show fandom and knowledge that he's also known for. So, Senator Min, do you want to just do a brief introduction, and then we'll get right into our first topic?
Thanks, Tim. And it's an honor to be on this panel with so many esteemed experts and leaders in the budget process. And I will confess that about a month ago, I removed myself from the budget committee because I didn't have the time, given all the commitments that I'm undertaking these days. But we are still very looped into what's going on. And as I think I think Pat and Sarah both alluded to, there was just late breaking news just earlier this afternoon about the Assembly, Senate counter to the governor's May revise. And all I'll say is in our caucus, we have pushed aggressively and early to try to formulate our own vision of the budget, one that protects the interests of hardworking men and women in the state, trying not to lose the progress that we've made over the last few years.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining. And for all of our panelists, I know, Wednesday, right in the middle of budget, in the heat of a legislative cycle, your time is incredibly valuable. So sharing it with us is, we can't thank you enough. And the information that we'll use here today not only will benefit the folks that have chimed in on this call, but our membership and leadership too will benefit greatly from it when we're able to share it with our workplace leaders. So with that, I'm going to jump right into our first topic. And, it's no surprise, we've already heard about it in multiple occasions that, the state indicated that there's a 44, 37, 26, I think I've heard, $billion budget deficit. Briefly, what caused this deficit? What are some of the immediate impacts on California public sector workers that at least now we can start going with? And Pat, I hate to put you on the spot. Pat, you're getting some real-time updates. So Pat, and then we can hear from the senator.
First, let me say Senator Min has been amazing on all of your issues. I try not to bug him unless I need to talk to him about something, but he has been fantastic on all of your issues, and it's his office and his staff, and they're fantastic to work with. So I just wanted to get that out there as well. Why do we have a budget deficit? The main reason, state revenue collections have been coming in much lower than previously projected, and forecasts for future revenues have also been adjusted downward as a result. And this occurred after several years of having multi-billion-dollar budget surpluses, and California is largely relying on high-income wage earners and capital gains taxes and whatnot. And if you don't collect enough of those, if the economy takes a slight downturn and whatnot, these are the problems we run into. It's not the first time it's happened. And it won't be the last, but this is where we are right now. Exacerbating the problem was last year, the 2022 tax year, you didn't have to file your taxes until November 16th. So when the legislature passed the 23-24 budget, they largely did it. They adopted the budget for the current fiscal year based on revenue projections, since they didn't have real-time numbers, since the taxes weren't due until November 16th. In December, we found out they were about $25 billion lower than policymakers expected. No fault of their own. They had to pass a budget. They made revenue estimates, and the revenue estimates fell short. So that's one of the major reasons why we have such a large deficit. But they're doing a really good job at lessening the impact, and it's certainly heartening to see the Assembly and Senate's version that they just literally released it an hour or so ago. I think the Senate's taking up budget subcommittee tomorrow and finalizing their reports and whatnot. But Senator Min and the Senate and the Assembly have done a really good job at minimizing the impacts. They took early actions, but cut about $17.5 billion in early April, reduce the budget deficit. So hopefully, when it's all said and done, the impacts will be lesser than expected. To just, for example, the governor proposed reducing $300 million in public health care cuts in his May revise, and the Assembly and Senate rejected those cuts. So, so we have a good shot at keeping that money. Of course, the legislative leaders and the governor will get together and negotiate some of this, but for now, we're looking forward to working with the Senate and the Assembly to get their versions passed, as opposed to the governor's May revise, which made some deeper cuts than we would like.
And Senator Min, I know you talked about your caucus and some of the ways that you're trying to lessen. I know what are some you and some of your colleagues at least hearing on some of these initial ones. I know that your colleague just released budget an hour ago, so I don't want to put you on the spot. I know that's pretty quick.
Yeah. So as far as I'd say a few things. First, I'm biased, but I think the Senate really has taken the leadership on the legislative side, and just in large part because we're more cohesive in a smaller group. There's, I think, more diversity of viewpoints in the Assembly, but I think the Senate early on realized that we wanted to get ahead of this thing. And so we worked and led, I think, on that initial $17 billion. And I wouldn't necessarily call them cuts. A lot of them were deferrals and delays. We had overspent and done a number of ambitious new spending programs in the past few years based on those robust budget projections. And so the easiest thing to start doing was just to kind of delay the rollout of some of those funds. Now, that all being said, I think the big question for us is this a one-year problem? Is it a 3-year problem? Or is it a longer problem? And I'll tell you, we have not gotten a good answer on that yet. I think there is some evidence to suggest that part of the revenue decline is because we have lost some high net worth individuals from the state. And because, as Pat mentioned, we're so dependent on we have a very progressive taxation system, which is really great, except that it means that we have a high variance in our revenues. And part of this problem was that we're projecting out, as Pat mentioned, on what our revenues are going to look like and passing budgets based on that. And I think last year, as we're looking back even the year before, we over projected revenues a little bit, and actually a lot last year. And so part of the decline we're seeing this year, part of the deficit is because we over projected last year and we overshot the mark. And now the good news is that we put a lot of money away. We were pretty cautious with how we spent it. So we have a lot of rainy day savings. We have a lot of different funds that we can dip into. And so far this year, we're not planning to dip in much into those funds, if at all, because this could be a 3-year problem. It could be longer. And I think, again, is this cyclical or is it structural? I know a lot of people have a hard time believing that, given how strong the economy is by all accounts, and the stock market's at record highs, why are we experiencing this structural problem? And that's, again, because we're so dependent on the high net worth individuals and big corporations for our revenue. But there is some reason for optimism. I mean, if you remember, some of the initial worst case scenarios had us looking at an $80 billion deficit, and it looks like we're going to land somewhere about half of that. And that's because the stock market has picked up, and a lot of our revenues come from high net worth individuals who make a lot of their money from the stock market. And so that has helped a little bit. But ultimately, the big question for us is this going to last more than a few years? If so, then we're going to have some deeper cuts potentially. Right now, I think the general approach of the Senate is to try to hold the bleeding, to not, for example, lay off any public workers, to try to, keep things even keeled for now. And I think there's both good labor and moral reasons to do that, to protect working families, but there's also good economic reasons, right? Because this is, at the end of the day, a decline in our revenues. And if we cut too deeply, we're going to make our economy worse. We're going to end up slowing down our revenues even further. And so when you talk to economists, what they will tell you want to do in a situation like this is some counter-cyclical measures to make sure that the economy stays strong, because ultimately our tax revenue is dependent on how strong our economy is. And so if we cut too deep, we're kind of creating that downward pressure on the economy. So we want to be careful how we approach this, but ultimately, a lot of this is going to depend on, is this more structural? Is it the result of people not coming to the state or leaving the state? Is it the result of businesses not choosing to do business here? Or is this just kind of a cyclical bump? Because we can withstand, I think, a cyclical downturn without too much pain. But if it's longer than a few years, then we're looking at some more significant problems.
Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you for providing to some of the context. Sarah from the Labor Federation. There's thousands of affiliate unions here in California, and trying to balance all of that here in these first few weeks of this tumultuous budget cycle. What's kind of the point of view from your seat in the House or train?
I would echo what has been said. I was around, and I think Pat, of course, was around during the Great Recession and the fights we had over the budget then. And that was furloughs of public employees. That was, people getting IOUs because they weren't getting paid. It was deep cuts we haven't recovered from. It was deep cuts to public benefit programs, social services. It was a bloodbath, and it was something that I think had a profound and lasting effect on the public sector, on public sector workers and public service. We have managed to avoid that. There are no furloughs. Like the senator said, there's a lot of deferrals. There was a lot of cuts to one-time. And we care a lot about that one-time funding, and we are fighting for it. And from what I can tell of my quick review of the legislature's budget agreement, a lot of what we care about has been restored. I will say, though, that we do have some concerns, which impact state workers, so not necessarily local government, but it's a trend, I think, that we see. And that is around sweeping vacant positions, which is not, I understand why it's done, but the governor in his budget, in his May revision, proposed a permanent elimination of what would be the equivalent of 10,000 state jobs. And it's one thing to have a freeze for these vacant state jobs. It's another to permanently eliminate positions, which reduce just the number of potential state workers in the state. And we already know that public employees could work 24 hours a day and still not fulfill the needs of the public. You all are understaffed, overworked. There's burnout, which leads to the lack of retention. And so I do think we need to be very careful of preserving our public sector workforce, preserving the programs that people rely on every day, and making sure that we have an adequate workforce to provide those services. Because we all know the quality of the services we provide to the public depends on the workforce. And so we're going to be watching this really closely. Right now, there's a lot of unity among our affiliates about the fights. And we are, from first glance, it looks like the legislature really pushed back on the things we care about.
Thank you, Sarah, and again, thank you so much for chiming in. I know it's you've had a rough day of commuting. Kind of moving to we're hearing so much between the governor's office, the legislature's budget. For some of us that aren't political or legislative insiders as much, I know over the next few weeks the legislature and the governor's office will try to negotiate a budget deal. So starting with Senator Min, can you kind of provide us some perspective on that, and maybe what role you and your colleagues, are playing? I think we're hearing some of it now, which is, having your own perspective and point of view, but, for some of our members, can you speak a little bit to that? Thanks.
Yeah, so in the Senate, I can only speak on our side. The Assembly operates a little bit differently, but there's 32 of us on the Democratic side, and no disrespect to the folks on the other side of the aisle, but they don't really have a role to play in this process, which they complain a lot about. But that's the benefits of us having a massive supermajority. And so the action takes place entirely within our caucus. And as I mentioned, I was on the Budget Committee until a few weeks ago. And I also sat on the budget subcommittee for education. So in both of those roles, we would weigh in more so on the subcommittee side, and we'd express our priorities and concerns. So for example, one of the things I have always stressed in education is that I think the CSUs get the short end of the stick, and that they've had deferred maintenance needs that are long-standing, that need some addressing. And when we had a surplus, for example, I tried to advocate for more investments there unsuccessfully, but that was part of the Senate's negotiation posture because I weighed in, right? And so each of us have a voice, and our voice is loudest within those subcommittees. And then they're also loud within the budget. And then a number of us, kind of self-segregate into different issue areas about things we care about. So some of us care about, say health and human services or social services or education or climate. And so, you'll have little caucuses, informal caucuses developed to try to advocate priorities within those buckets. Each week we sit down and meet for our budget priorities. And I will just tell you, labor is well advocated for within our caucus. Municipal employees are well advocated for in our caucus by a number of our colleagues, and you can guess who they are. And, sometimes labor has their own disputes, right, within labor, but by and large, I think we're all trying to minimize the bleeding as much as possible. And that's where we're starting from. And that is why you've seen, for example, when the Senate's come out with our particular proposals, they have tried to emphasize a long-term view that minimizes cuts, that tries to keep as much of the COLA increases that were negotiated by certain types of workers in the last few years in place. We really are trying to keep you guys in mind, and for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. But I don't want to give away all the contents of our conversations, but I can just tell you again that whether it's you guys, whether it's some of our drivers, whether it's people doing mental health services, I think there's strong advocates for all those types of workers and many more in our caucus.
Oh, thank you so much, Senator Min. And Sarah, speaking to, I think you could speak probably pretty well, and Pat too, chime in on, there's a lot of competing resources, and even within, the labor community, sometimes we like to joke, sometimes the best fights to watch are family fights. I'm sure the same can be said with legislators, within the family. So what are some of the ways, that you all in this budget making process try to navigate some of those competing interests, and what role do you all play?
So who do you want to go?
Sarah, if you're able to jump in, since you got a lot of the affiliates, so that might be fresh on your mind here on the train.
Yes, I'm going to apologize. At this point, it's a little crazy, so I'll be off camera, and I apologize to all of your members. But it's actually, on the budget, it has not been that bad to navigate family fights. I think we've been pretty united. Partly it's a little bit, we've avoided the really deep cuts and choices. And we tried really early to bring together, we have a public sector working group to bring together public sector unions to hear about, like, where are the issues? How can we echo each other's asks? How can we make sure that labor has a bottom line that we're agreeing on? And we also have a legislature that's willing to fight with the governor and stand up and say, like, these are not acceptable cuts. And one of the ones we were really worried about, which it would have impacted local government, was the cuts to public health and to local public health departments. And so I glanced briefly at the legislature's proposal. It looks like those cuts have been restored. And so, we try to navigate the budget with the way we navigate everything with affiliates, which is hearing who is impacted, who has members who are impacted, and trying to do our best to make sure we are in the halls and in people's offices fighting to make sure that workers are at the center of the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And Pat, yeah, same topic to you in these next few weeks is,
Yeah.
how are you seeing it?
And first, real quick, I didn't get to mention Sarah. I've worked with Sarah a lot. She and the Labor Fed are amazing, and Sarah says, Pat, do this, and I go do it. So she's fantastic at what she does, and I appreciate working with her on these issues. And just to get back to the legislature's budget proposal, it not only balances this year's budget, but also hopefully balances the 2025-26 budget as well. So they're being very responsible with regard to the way they're taking this on. But we represent OCEA. We also represent state scientists, state engineers, and the California Highway Patrol Association. So we represent state public employees as well. And we all fight. We all head in the same direction. That the bad cuts affect us all, and we get together and we fight those. And then each individual group has their own issues as well that they that will go in and fight for. For example, Orange County Employees Association, court reporters, court clerks, or if it's IHSS, or if it's public health cuts that affect local governments and whatnot. We go in and fight for that for them, and then for the state scientists who are largely special funded. That's another issue, right? Because they're not funded through the general fund. So we try to fight, cuts to, or transfers from special funds to the general fund to make sure their programs aren't reduced. And as Sarah mentioned, the governor wants to sweep 10,000 vacant positions, and make an across the board 7.95% cut to all departments. So we try to mitigate those cuts as well. Because what happens at the state tends to flow downward, to local governments. And so with regard to the 10,000, the sweeping of the 10,000 vacant positions, I think they have to be vacant for a year or more. This is not something new. It's been tried in the 2000s and whatnot. Whether or not they're able to achieve any of the savings associated with that, is yet to be seen, because they won't be able to identify those positions until probably halfway through the budget year. Same thing with the 7.95% cut. So the other thing that we fought and were successful fighting is the governor wanted to eliminate the telework stipend that all state employees get. The legislature scored the savings, but they're leaving it up to the governor to negotiate that with the bargaining units. Absent, he wanted the legislature to just make that cut unilaterally without having to negotiate. So fortunately for us, the governor or the legislature, they scored the savings, but they're requiring the governor to work that out in collective bargaining. So we all head in the same direction, and then at some point we all sort of go off in our little directions to fight for each unit's a bargaining unit's separate issues. And OCEA most notably has been the courts and whatnot in the last several years. So
yeah, that's always something we're watching, and I know we have a lot of our court workplace leaders on, and we've been working closely with Pat, with the senator's office, with the Labor Federation on funding this cycle and in many previous cycles. So thank you for all of your commitment on that issue. We've talked about a lot of cuts, about potential service reductions, and but we don't want to ever end one of these town halls on necessarily a fully negative note. So our last topic before we look to some questions and some additional closing comments, what about this process, or maybe some things we could be optimistic about, either this budget cycle or this process? I have heard a few things. I think the sometimes the unity of the labor movement and kind of working together to support one another and lift each other up is something that can be seen as a positive. And Senator Min, I know you mentioned in the beginning that in topic one that some reserves. So those are a few things I've heard that have been optimistic. But Sarah, I want to make sure you get a first crack at this, just in case we lose you. What are you seeing optimistic about what's going on here in the budget cycle this cycle?
I mean, I think the good thing is that this time we are prepared. Like, I think Senator Min made a good point that we have this is not unusual. This happens cyclically where our revenue is just lower than we expected. We do depend on the wealthy and on big corporations having initial public offerings and capital gains. And so, but now we do have a rainy day fund. We do have savings. We do have money in reserves. And I think there is an understanding, as again Senator Min said, that there is an economic consequence to cutting jobs and to cutting programs that benefit the economy. And so I do hope that we've learned those lessons. I think the legislature's budget proposal really restores some important things that were cut, and I'm hoping we can get it done in the next couple of weeks. And, we're not in the midst of a great recession. Like, hopefully the economy will keep being strong, and that will mean that we have revenues. And I do hope, this is my aspirational, I do hope we will look to other sources of revenue. I do think we need reform to our tax system to make it a little bit more stable. Unfortunately, part of the instability of our three-legged stool is the limitation on property tax. So there's a lot to be done, and I think hopefully we can get through this year and have a healthier budget on the other side.
Thanks, Sarah. Pat, how about you? What are you seeing in some optimism out there in the midst of all this doom and gloom?
Well, to Sarah's point, we are, and Senator Min's point, we are prepared. I've been through budget deficits in the 90s and the 2000s, and now we have this one. And while the number's large, those previous ones were much more difficult. There were really deep cuts made to programs. I mean, the courts in like, I think 2008 or something lost, $1 billion, and that's never been put back totally. In the 2000s, we had raids on PERS by, Governor Wilson. We had to fight that, and then, but really deep cuts. And while this is a large number, fortunately for us, we've had a number of things happen. We had Prop 25 passed. We have a majority vote budget, so budgets can't be held hostage by the minority party. Also, we have supermajority in both the Senate and the Assembly, which makes it easier to get things through. If we need a 2/3 vote on something, whether it's a revenue increase or whatnot. I think SB1 back in the day. And we have healthy reserves in the legislature. Senator Min and this governor and Governor Brown and whatnot. They were really conscientious about making sure we had not what was required to put in the reserves, but they went above board. They have the rainy day fund, and they created, reserve for emergencies. They have a reserve for schools. They have a couple other reserves, and I believe in this budget that they're proposing, they have an additional reserve proposed to get around the GAN limit. Should we experience surpluses like we had in the last couple of years. So, we've been through this before. I've been through it before. It was much worse. I remember I worked in the speaker's office. I didn't get paid. I got loans, fortunately, from Golden One. But I wasn't getting a paycheck. There are no furloughs or PLPs proposed for state workers. And it seems, just looking at what the legislature has proposed, that they've not only balance the budget. Their proposal not only balances the budget this year, but next year as well. So, you know, in the stock markets, we have the fifth largest economy in the world, and the stock market seems to be reaching new highs. So hopefully this isn't a prolonged issue for us.
Well, thank you, Pat, and thanks for offering some of that historic perspective, particularly with a few different seats in the House that you've had. Also want to just quickly throw out before we have Senator Min give us some hopefully some optimistic things you've seen. If you do have any questions, just put them in the chat to the OCEA Zoom, who's the host. So you know we are collecting those. So if those start coming through, just another quick reminder. So Senator Min, some optimism you're seeing out there in the midst of the doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic, starting with the strong economy. I know a lot of people have concerns about rising costs, but wages are strong. The job market generally is very strong, and that's also true in California. Now, we have our challenges here, including the budget, but I think we have a lot of reasons to think that this is going to be a short and abbreviated downturn in our budget situation. And I also want to put this in context. Depending on how you calculate it, our budget is something like $290 billion or $400 billion. So when we talk about $44 billion, that's a huge amount of money, but you have to measure it against the backdrop of what we're looking at. And if we were able to, you know, save more money, which we're not constitutionally allowed to do, we would have put more aside in previous years. If we could borrow money, we would probably just borrow a little bit of money right now to fill the gaps. But because we're a state and not the federal government, we can't do those things. So, you know, I will say to the extent we could, we tried to be fiscally responsible in the past. You may remember us sloganing fiscally responsible budget the last couple of years. And that wasn't a joke, and that wasn't just empty bragging. Like, we really were budgeting very responsibly. And that means that the impacts you're going to feel over the next year or two will not be like earth changing in the ways that they might be if we'd been a little bit more reckless in past years. I think the other thing we have going for us is the strong federal investments that are still coming to California from IRA and BIF and some of the other major stimulus programs that they passed a few years back. And because we have the Biden administration in place that is administering those funds, because of the close relationship that California has with the Biden administration, whether it's the vice president, whether it's the governor's relationship with the president, or any number of other close ties, I think the federal government is invested right now in seeing California do well. But obviously, we have a very important election in front of us. And I think this election will not only have profound ramifications for democracy and the rule of law and the path that we choose as a country, but they'll also have a lot of implications for our quality of life here in California. Because all the things I mentioned about our close relationship with this administration are basically the opposite when it comes to the Trump administration. I think if Donald Trump is elected, particularly if he has a Republican Congress, you can expect to see a lot of punitive measures aimed our way. And to me, that is the biggest risk we face. But if we can get around that, if we can, and I don't mean to be partisan, but you know, if we can elect or reelect the people that we know care about California, I would expect that this is going to be a short, abbreviated problem we're facing, and that we're going to emerge out of this continuing to stay strong, continuing to serve as a progressive beacon for the rest of the country.
Thank you, Senator Min. You know, a lot going on here with this budget, and definitely, and you know, we've seen some of the benefits too of a strong federal government investment coming out of COVID. I know a lot of local government was able to be kind of ride that wave as a result of some of the actions that were taken, and definitely have seen it on that front line. Gonna take a quick minute to see if we're having any additional questions come through the chat. As we kind of start wrapping up here, one thing that we like to do on these town halls is keep them tight, because we know everyone in this call has worked an entire day of work serving the public. I imagine Senator Min probably has at least three other events to attend. For some of us, this will be the last event of our evening. for some, they're just getting started, and that's working for the people. So I know, Dave's going to be helping out when they're out in session and the budget's going on. I know it's an absolute slog to kind of get it done. So we appreciate the work that you're doing up there. One question that did come through, but I think it's more of from one of our members who just kind of wants to, how do we learn more about, what's going on legislatively? Sorry, panelists, I think this one's kind of for me. So for our OCEA members who do want to get more involved, first place to start is go to ocea.org/get involved and become a workplace leader or steward. Our stewards are our eyes and ears in the workplace, and that's kind of the path you start taking up the leadership ladder and activist ladder here in our union. I know, I saw Jennifer Morgan, who's on the call. Jennifer Morgan is, sorry to shout you out. We have a lot of our workplace leaders on the call, but just, I know someone whose court's been mentioned a lot. Jennifer's been, workplace leader in the courts as a steward, and serves as our PAC chair, on our board of directors, and involved in everything, and just started as a steward. I also see Adele, who's also one of our OCER's trustees, right? Started there in that regard as just a workplace leader, right? But if you want to get more involved with what's going on legislatively, our stewards are more than welcome to be active in that space and hear more about what's going on. So if no other questions are coming through the chat, it means we either just buried them in an information team, or we answered all of their questions perfectly. I like to think that we answered all of their questions perfectly. But I do want to quickly turn it over to Pat. Any final words of wisdom? Then I'll turn it over to Sarah, Dave, and then, of course, for the last word, our president, Judy.
No words of wisdom, but I just want to tell all the OCEA members too that Tim and Charles, and I know Tia's on, and Judy and Maria and Chris and Angelo. I mean, they all do an amazing job for you. They keep me on my toes. Anytime I call and need something, or need you to reach out locally on bills or budget issues and whatnot, they're always there. So I just want to give you guys a shout out as well. And it's a pleasure representing you, and I appreciate you including me in this today.
Thank you so much. Sarah, any words of wisdom here as we wrap up tonight? Hopefully you get home and get some dinner.
No words of wisdom, just that as you have great leadership, you have a great advocate in Sacramento, in Pat and in Aaron Reed. And the Labor Fed is here. We're here for all our affiliates, so you can always contact us, not only on budget issues, but we work on issues that impact all unions, all workers. So labor law enforcement. We've been doing a lot of work on artificial intelligence and the impact of tech on the workplace. And so always open to any questions. Anyone can reach out to us or reach out to Pat, and he can get in touch with us. But yeah, just really wanted to thank you for hosting this town hall and inviting us. I think it's really important, great information, and hope I can be included next time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And shout out to Ivan. I know you're always busting your behind on public sector work, so really appreciate it. Senator Min, any final words of wisdom for the OCEA team here?
I just want to echo what was said. You guys have some great advocates between Tim and Pat, Sarah at the Labor Fed. I mean, they're always proactive. They reach out to us ahead of time around things. They make sure we have dialogue, and that's helpful because it's, if we don't know about concerns, say that your employees have, we can't really address them, right? So having that relationship's important. So you really do have the best working for you. And I have the pleasure of representing a bunch of you, and I just want to thank you for your hard work. I mean, Orange County is kind of an exemplar of good government, ironically, given that this is like Orange County, right? But when people think of our public services as functioning at a high level, whether it's our courts, whether it's any of our local jurisdictions, and you guys are the glue that makes that happen. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you for all you do. And We appreciate your advocacy.
I want to do this zot for all the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zot. The UCI. The UCI is strong on this call, and to turn over to our most famous on the call UCI alum for the final word, I'm going to turn it over to President Judy Bowling.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Again, I just want to thank the whole panel, Sarah, Pat, and Senator Min. Thank you for being here. And I thank all the members that were here on the call after working a hard day, serving the citizens of Orange County, that you came on this call and were here. So we appreciate that you taking the time away from your family and your off time to learn more about what's going on with OCEA. So with that, I release everybody and have a good evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming.